Hi, I'm Laurie and welcome to The Patient is Always Right. This is where myself and Derek, Ignite CEO and founder, have unfiltered real talk with guests from the aesthetics, medical, dental and wellness industries. No fluff, just the truth about building a business, facing challenges and working with patients in a fast-moving, ever-changing industry. We're bringing you the highs, the lows and everything in between. If you want honest conversations and real stories behind the success, you're in the right place.
So today we have Dr. Sugz Maha, who is a copywriter and marketer as well as a dentist. He's one of the very few people who understands both the dental world as well as the marketing world. Quite often that relationship can be fraught with friction, challenges, misunderstandings, lack of communication, gaps, and he offers a really interesting perspective which I can't wait to dive into with him.
And of course we're going to be taking him to the confessionals to find out his worst, awkward, funniest patient stories. There's no holding back there.
So do you want to get him or should I?
I'll go and get him.
All right. So Sugz, thank you so much for coming on to the show. The Patient is Always Right.
No problem. I mean, it's just like it's a different space for me because we were saying before how like I've mainly filmed podcasts or anything just remotely. But because I started the whole copywriting thing during COVID, there's just never been the opportunity like this. So it's cool.
It's great. Well, I'm glad you like the space. So
yeah.
No, great to have you here. To kind of warm up, I wanted to do a really quick rapid fire round.
Yeah.
So just pure instinct, gut reactions. So I'll keep it simple to start with. Dental implants or veneers?
Veneers.
Okay. Traditional marketing or digital marketing?
Traditional marketing.
Okay, cool. Traditionalist at heart. AI generated content or amateur human written content?
Oh, you already know the answer. Amateur human written any day.
Wow, interesting. Okay, good. Seeing 20 patients a day or writing 20 pieces of content a day?
Ooh. Writing 20 pieces of content.
Okay, great. Scaling a business fast or keeping it boutique and small?
Boutique and small.
Okay. Working in clinic full-time or full-time copywriting?
Oh, I don't. Can I say neither? No, it has to be one.
I mean, you can.
It would
abstain.
Yeah, I would probably abstain. I think neither.
Well, and I think we'll get onto this, but I think actually your hybrid role, if you like, is kind of your superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll let you off on that one.
Yeah.
Fine. Right. Email marketing or social media marketing?
Email marketing.
Okay. Yeah. Digital impressions or traditional impressions?
I think that one I'll say digital.
Okay. Fine. And finally, morning person or night owl?
Morning.
Okay. Early morning riser.
I would prefer that, but it's just routine doesn't allow that to happen. If I could, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Do you think you'd be like 5 a.m. wake up kind of guy, hit the gym?
If I could, yeah. If I could design my life how I wanted to design it, it would be that, and I'd go to bed at 9:30 p.m. But just, life doesn't work that way.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. No, thanks for that. So we've got a special little segment for you.
Okay.
Which is bespoke to you. Don't worry, you don't have to be nervous.
Fine.
It's a little challenge. So I'm going to just grab these. So let's see how I do this eloquently. I know you feel very strongly about AI versus human, human copywriting, let's say. So we thought we'd do a little challenge.
Oh,
where we put you on the spot. Okay. So we'll give you, let's say, 5 seconds, or maybe actually 5 seconds. Is probably a bit short. Maybe 10 seconds. Anyway, we'll give you a finite amount of time.
Okay.
And you have to tell us, we're going to show you 5 or 6 ads, 6 ads. And you have to tell us whether you think they are human written or AI.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah, let's go for it. AI.
That's not correct, actually.
Really?
Yep. All right, next one.
That has to be AI.
That's correct. That is AI.
Yeah.
Quick reader, by the way.
Yeah.
Quick reader. That one?
I will say AI.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That one?
Human.
That's correct. Wow. Okay. This man knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
All right. And that one?
I will say, this is okay. I will say AI.
He's correct once again.
Yeah.
Good, almost perfect track.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and the last one.
AI.
Interesting. Okay, this is copywriter.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's 4 out of 6. That's pretty good. I mean, will you take that? 4 out of 6.
I'll take
that's
that.
Pretty good.
I'll
Okay.
take that.
Interesting. Okay. So now for the grand reveal. So there's 2 that were written by copywriters that you thought were AI. So interestingly, you spotted all the AIs correctly, but you didn't spot the 2 that were written by copywriter correctly, which is interesting. Those were in fact written by you.
Were they actually?
Yes. So it looks like you might have a weakness for your own.
Yeah, exactly.
You identified it, but they were written by you, and we had them mocked up. Now, all of the images are actually AI generated. I don't know if you picked up on that or not. It was obviously more about the copy, but 4 out of 6. I mean, I would say that's pretty good.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I don't know how to feel about that one. Do you know what it is? There's a certain pattern that AI I feel has. And weirdly enough, the one I wrote kind of followed it, but it's always the kind of bold statement, and it's in reality, or actually it's this, and it's very kind of robotic. And I think AI just has these telltale kind of signs sometimes, but clearly, I think, to be fair, with short copy, I think it's often harder to, because say for example 2 lines or 3 lines is quite hard to distinguish sometimes. I think it's much easier with longer form copy.
Yeah, and you're under pressure, and I'm holding it up awkwardly, and the lights are on, and the glare and stuff. So, look, it's a challenging exercise, and so thank you for being a good sport. But yeah, I would say 4 out of 6, and you correctly identified all of the AI. I would say that's pretty good. That's really good. I'm impressed. I didn't know which one was which. I mean, Laurie had to tell me. I had no idea which was which. So I did ask Laurie to write it on the back of them. So I
did you?
Yeah, I didn't know. But no, that was good. That was well worth it. One of the reasons I wanted to have you in the studio today and on the show is because you sort of sit across this chasm, or this gap between dentistry, or even just being a clinician, and marketing. And I think, having run a marketing agency primarily for clinics and clinicians, there can be a lot of friction in that relationship. And so I thought, actually, when we were sort of starting to think about what we want to get out of the show, and who would be great to be on the show, and who has really interesting insights, I think there are very few people that can actually bridge that gap. As a marketer, I try to kind of reach over the other side and understand and come from a place of empathy, but it's not always easy, and I can't just drop my identity as a marketer and pretend to be a dentist, right?
Yeah.
I think you're going to have some really interesting insights to share today. When people sort of try and put you in a bucket, like, and they ask you, what do you do, or what is it that you do for a living? How do you position that?
I feel like my fundamental identity is as a writer. Like, just that's what I identify myself as. It's kind of evolved over time, and it's become like now more of a conversion strategy as a whole, incorporating bits of design and things like that. That's why when you asked the question of whether I would, work in a clinic full time or be a marketer full time, I responded neither, because it's like a flywheel for me. So everything I learn in the clinic translates into marketing, and then vice versa. So, I think I would never want to be put into a certain bucket, because I've always been someone who spins plates, and to this day I still do it. And if I wasn't marketing, it would be something else. I would always try and find something else. So yeah.
What's like a fact about you that most people wouldn't know?
I made music for about 12, 13 years.
Okay, wow.
That was the last thing I did before copywriting.
Okay. But again, alongside...
Yeah.
People,
yeah, so while I was studying... So literally I started making music when I was about 14. And literally up until about the age of like 24, 25, I really thought like, okay, I'm going to make it big. Like dentistry was a backup option.
Really? Okay, interesting.
And I thought, this is going to be it. Like, I'm going to become a big musician. I'm going to do the O2. I'm going to, like, I really thought it was going to be that. There's 2 reasons I think it didn't happen. I guess it's subjective. Some people could like listen to my stuff and be like, mate, you weren't that good. But I think it's also just sometimes spinning plates, it works against you, because a lot of the time, for example, when I was in uni and we had finals coming up, there was loads of big opportunities that I had to work with certain artists or go to certain studio sessions, which is how you get bigger as an artist, is networking with other artists. And I had to forego those, because at the end of the day, I was thinking, well, look, the university investment is so large, I can't afford to take a gamble and be like, okay, I'm going to go to the studio session instead of revise for finals. And then it tapered off from there.
I mean, that must have been a really difficult sacrifice to make, certainly at the time, because if dentistry was kind of a backup option for you at that point in time, that must have been a really hard sacrifice to make.
Yeah. I mean, even when we're talking about the identity thing before, and what would I identify myself as? And I said writer, because even at that time, I identified myself as a writer, and I was writing music. Now it's writing copy, but then it's writing emails sometimes, and it could be writing content. It doesn't matter what it is. The vehicle is irrelevant to me. It's more the act of writing. But it was difficult because that's what I identified myself as for a long period of time. The way I dressed, the way I act, the way I talked at the time was all influenced by music. I've still to this day not sold my microphone, and I've not sold my preamp and all the recording gear, because I've always been like, what if I want to go back to it? And it is hard to let go.
Fair enough. What kind of music were you?
Hip hop music.
Okay.
Hip hop music. I used to do it all. So I've kind of always been someone who's like rap, sing, produce everything. So I try to do everything myself.
Yeah.
And obviously being a student, it's like you can't afford studio space. So then you're just trying to DIY everything. So yeah, that's the space I was involved with for a long period of time.
You mentioned previously, I think on other podcasts, that you weren't a straight A student.
No.
You still made it, into dentistry and obviously through dentistry. What was it just the fact that it was kind of a sort of a backup or a plan B that kept you pushing through, in terms of like that was a path of certainty?
I think naturally I'm not an academic person. I'm not naturally someone who can read a book and memorize it really quickly, which a lot of dentists are. Like I encounter dentists who are just so incredibly smart, like they just can retain information like a sponge. That's just never been me. And dentistry for me, as you said, like it was a bit of a backup option. And I do feel like perhaps I always had in the back of my mind, like I didn't really want to do it at the start. And I kind of fell into it, and it just grew from there. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it took time. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of failing to get where I'm at, but it ended up worth it, right? Like,
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, now you found this niche of your own, which is awesome. And as I said earlier, you kind of bridged the gap between, the marketing world and the clinical world. I guess in terms of you being a dentist then, in terms of wearing that hat and that identity, which part of it would you say makes you feel the least comfortable with that sort of identity?
I think with dentists, you get two types of dentists. You get the really super clinical, really skilled, dexterous people, and then you get the people person kind of dentist. And I think I'm kind of in the second basket. So the part that I find kind of least appealing is the really surgical stuff, which is why when you mentioned kind of dental implants or veneers, like implants don't even, implants, blood, all that kind of stuff. It's not that I'm like scared of blood.
Yeah.
I still do extractions every day. Like that's not a problem, but it just doesn't interest me. And like a lot of dentists will tell me, especially older dentists, they'll tell me implants is the way to go because, there's big margins in it. From a business standpoint, it's really good. You can, if you fill your books up with 2 or 3 implant cases a day, you're winning. But I struggle to do things just for the sake of money. I just find there's no point. Dentistry is already a really somewhat lucrative career. And if you just being a general dentist doing what you enjoy doing can be enough, right? So I'd say the surgical aspect of it more than anything. That.
Do you ever feel like other dentists, they maybe don't take you as seriously because you've got this big side hustle, which I 100% think it's a superpower, right? And we're going to get on to later about, I'd love to hear about how that influences how you communicate with patients and stuff like that. But do you ever feel like perhaps some of your peers might not take you as seriously because whilst they're doubling down on clinical stuff, you are widening? And you made the point earlier when you sort of spoke about dentistry and music and how sometimes it can also be a drawback if you're kind of in two camps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel that sometimes. Not overtly. It's not like people are like, you're not a serious dentist. No one would ever say that. But what I do feel is if I ever bring up the fact that I do marketing, copywriting, people kind of brush that aside. So if I bring it up in conversation, they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, interesting. So what courses have you done recently? And it's like, it gets brushed aside as a thing. And I think the idea of having an interest outside of dentistry is alien to a lot of people because there's not a lot of dentists that do, or that I've encountered anyway. And And I don't think that's a fault of dentists. I just think dentistry is such an intense profession. There's so much involved with it. And, a lot of people tend to ask me, like, how do I find the time to do it? But for me, there's a passion involved. And like I said, my identity is always as a writer. So I need something to fuel that. And if I didn't have that, I'd be lost. I'd be drained just doing dentistry. It wouldn't be the same.
How has being a writer, first and foremost, and being a copywriter, and quite frankly, writing great copy, persuasive copy and sales copy and so forth, how has that skill set changed and impacted how you speak to patients in surgery?
So the way I think about writing copy, I'm going to go on a tangent, but I'll come back.
Tangents are great.
So a lot of people, when ChatGPT came out, obviously I got a lot of like the doomsday messages of like, mate, you just learned a skill that no one's going to want in like 5 years. And when I explain that to people, the actual copy, the writing process is not that special. Like theoretically, anyone can do it and even AI can do it. But actually what it is, and my clients come to me for, is the ideas and presenting and organizing those ideas in a certain way that is going to be persuasive to people. That's ultimately what writing is to me. It's organization of thought. It's not the words that go behind it, because ultimately, even with copywriting, for example, you're not trying to be Ernest Hemingway. You're really trying to convey a message in a certain way that's succinct and that captures emotion, right? And it's the same thing in dentistry, where it's organization of ideas when you're presenting treatment to patients. What copywriting has allowed me to do is organize my thoughts in a certain way that is logical, yet evokes emotion from the consumer with regards to writing copy. But when I'm talking to patients now, it's the same thing. So for example, basic copywriting 101, structure of any sort of copy in the world, Facebook ad, long form sales copy, whatever it is problem, agitate, solution. In dentistry, it is kind of the same thing. Now, I'm not saying we're trying to sell something to patients, because I know dentists hate the idea of selling. But when you're presenting something to a patient, problem, agitate, solution works really well, because if you present the problem and not agitate it in a sense of trying to evoke fear, because that's not the right thing to do, and patients are coming to you with fear, so you don't want to do that. But agitate in the sense of let them know what the alternative of not taking you up on that.
Like, what's at stake, basically?
Exactly.
If you don't treat this now, the cost could be X in 5, 10,
exactly.
15, 20 years or whatever.
Exactly. That's bare bones, but that is the basic kind of structure that you can follow in dentistry. Even if you don't want anything to do with marketing and you find it all bullshit, fine, no problem. But if you just learn these like basic structures, just learning persuasion is really important for just general communication. I'm not just talking dentistry. It's helped me massively in just life and communicating with people in general. I think it's really worthwhile.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that clinic owners and associates make when, like, with marketing?
I think sometimes what I see a lot of is clinic owners bitching about other agencies that they've worked with and saying, oh, this person charged me X amount and the leads were crap. They said there was going to be Invisalign. The patient didn't even want Invisalign. And although there could be an element of truth to that, and I know there are some rogue agencies out there, equally, you have to think, do you have the patient journey, the funnel within your own practice that is going to help to convert those patients? And I think that's a big mistake, is thinking that Facebook ads or organic content or any of this stuff is just going to magically fix your business. That's not the way it is. Patients are going to walk in that door, and what's done from that stage until the moment they walk out of that door, that's the part that they have to fix. And that's simple stuff, right? Like, that's like the interaction with the reception, the experience in the waiting room. What are they seeing when they're in the waiting room? Is it a magazine that's on the table, or have you got stuff on the TV?
Yeah.
But then I would say from the associate angle, and I can say this being an associate as well, it's really tempting to kind of choose your job based on how busy a practice is. And you kind of assume, okay, you pay X amount to your principal and it's their job to generate the patients for you. You just need to sit there and deliver the treatment. And I think now we're stepping into a world where that's not really the case anymore. I'm not saying you need to run your own Facebook ads, even though some are, and that's fine, that's amazing. But just being more conducive to the whole marketing aspect of things. Like, for example, if your principal is looking to run more organic content, being willing to sit in front of a camera and say something, that makes a massive difference, right? Because if a patient walks in and they've seen your face already,
Absolutely.
that's a massive win. And I think being resistant to that is just like you're working against yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can't complain that a clinic's busy, but then you're not doing anything to help your principal with that.
Do you think associates should all be focusing on building a brand of sorts, either around their own personal brand or kind of their brand as a clinician? Do you think they should, every associate should have an Instagram or a LinkedIn or a Facebook page or a Google Maps listing? Or
I do think, we are stepping into that world now, especially if you're in the cosmetic realm and you're doing things like composite bonding and veneers and Invisalign. Patients are going to look at things like Instagram. I mean, it's never going to harm you to do these things. And at the end of the day, building a personal brand, whether or not it's associated with dentistry or you're going to do something else, it just helps to, because, for example, our relationship now wouldn't have happened if I didn't put myself out there. And there's so many cool people that I've met within dentistry that I would have had no idea about had I not put myself out there. And I don't know like what the next 5 years look like. This personal brand that I'm building could grow into something else, and it could be a product that I develop it or my own offer in the future, or who knows. And having all these useful people that I know, that could lead to so many opportunities. So it's not just about necessarily thinking about driving patients or attracting patients. It's thinking about putting yourself out there and putting as many feelers out there so that you can open as many doors as possible.
what do you think will be the biggest sort of trend or the biggest change in the next 5 years in dental marketing specifically?
Definitely the way things are going, organic is just seems like the most natural thing, especially because PPC is getting so much more expensive now. The difficulty with organic is attribution and kind of figuring out, okay, well, how many leads came from Instagram? And I think from kind of a marketer perspective, it's vastly easier to explain. If you have X amount of ad spend based on our last X amount of clients, this is how much you'll generate in terms of leads.
Yeah.
Whereas trying to persuade someone to film X amount of content, which might fall on deaf ears, right? Like you can't control the algorithm. And I mean, I even noticed this myself when I've got people that sometimes message me on LinkedIn about how they build their profile. And I say to them that, you know, there are sometimes that I write a post and it will get 50 likes. And then there's sometimes I'll write a post and it will get like 2. And sometimes that one is the one that I really thought would take off and I put a lot of time into. And ultimately it is that consistency, because that post that got 2 likes or whatever, someone has seen that and they've registered in their mind, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, that, okay, there's this dude that's a dentist and a copywriter. Okay, I'll bank that because I might need someone like that in the future. And I think that's what patients are doing as well, is patients are seeing stuff like this on Instagram and banking it. Like it's very rare a patient's going to
See it and out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just don't see that happening. And I also think another big trend could be, this is just purely predictive, I'm not seeing any sort of stats that lead me to think this, but I think more collaboration with things outside of dentistry. So for example, if you're a cosmetic clinic and you're trying to appeal to younger people, you know, whether kind of brand partnerships or partnering with influencers, not necessarily just influencers, but YouTubers or things like that. It'll be interesting to see if someone kind of steps into that sphere a bit more, because a lot of Americans I see doing it. Like there's a guy called The Dentist. He does a lot of these kind of shock clickbait kind of YouTube videos, and he's getting tons of, like hundreds of thousands of views. I don't know how many followers he's got. And it's an interesting conversation to have, because in marketing as a whole, we're talking about how YouTube is starting to top search rankings, right? When people are searching for stuff. And I don't know if enough clinics are really doing enough on YouTube, but I think that's a space that's kind of undiscovered to an extent.
I agree. I rarely see any dentist doing anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
There's a few big sort of YouTube channels in the medical aesthetics world that we've come across, and they do it well. Right. But I think dentistry, even ads, even paid ads on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we've done a few pilots recently on YouTube, because obviously you get to use the Google data and you get to use the Google keyword searches, right? So anyone who searches for Invisalign in Slough on Google, you can show a YouTube video too, right?
Right.
Using ads. So it's extremely powerful, because you can literally show your ads to people who are in market. And because it's video, although it's not organic. Video is arguably the best way to build trust and authority on a one-to-many basis. I mean, I always tell clinicians, like, producing a good video is like, it's almost like, imagine you're doing a mini consultation with 1,000 people at the same time.
Yeah.
Like whilst you're sleeping. Okay, it's a slight sort of, kind of,
but yeah.
slightly over dramatic, but it can be so powerful. And look, the results are kind of, we haven't really got solid results yet. It's something we've started doing recently. It is more expensive.
Yeah.
It's also obviously very sensitive to the structure and the flow of the content, and attention spans are short, and that's the challenge. And it's just trying to get the hook in there and trying to get the format right. And so, yeah, I think Facebook and Google were maybe a lot easier because you could get away with more basic content, whereas now in more of a content first and video driven world, it's really all about the video and the content and what you film.
Yeah, and I think also with YouTube, the beautiful thing about it is that it is literally, it's an asset, because once you've made that video, whether it's 4 years old, 5 years old, it will still come up in people's recommended.
Yeah.
So there's not very many social platforms that I can think of that you can post content on and it will literally live forever, and new people will still be discovering it.
I mean, we've spoken a little bit about AI and your sort of love-hate relationship with AI. So what do you love AI for? You obviously mentioned that it has a place, and actually you also mentioned that, copywriting, the writing in itself is not necessarily maybe what differentiates a good copywriter from a great copywriter, or that perhaps anyone can do it. It's more the ideation and understanding your audience and that sort of stuff. What do you love AI for? Like, how do you use it in your day-to-day life, in your copywriting?
I use it both in as a copywriter and as a dentist. So I'll start with, as a copywriter, what it's really useful for is it stops blank Google Doc syndrome. Before, what I'd do is, if I had a client and I had a brief, I'd just be staring at the blank Google Doc for ages, trying to think of something, and I'll write something, and then I'll delete it, and I'll write something, and it just doesn't click. And what AI is really great for, and what I use it as, is like a junior writer. It's like having a writer that doesn't complain about hours, that works anytime I want. It is really good at producing like mid-tier content. I'd say like 6, 7 out of 10 content. But what it can't do, because it doesn't understand human emotion, is it can't understand your ideal customer, and it can't understand psychology. It doesn't have experiences to draw upon. So I'd say what it's really good for is ideation and getting things off the ground.
Yeah. And
then you can just kind of run with it. Other things it's really good for is just like, sometimes I'm writing a piece of copy and it's going in a direction that I don't really want it to go in. And it's not where I designed it to go in. So I'll put it into something like ChatGPT, and I've got certain prompts, and because I pay for premium, it's got the projects function. So I can kind of upload copy of my own and kind of get it to steer it back in the right direction. That's what's really good for. And then dentistry wise, there's so much good stuff out there. Like there's guys like Pearl AI and like these people that are like helping you diagnose with radiographs. And then you've got the AI notes. So it's kind of a subtle plug because they're technically my client, but dental audio notes, they're really good. But there's also people like Heidi, Digital TCO, and all these kind of guys who are recording the notes and transcribing it. And that saved me so much time. But again, you can't trust what because sometimes it will record a consultation like we're having, and then it'll get it completely wrong, or it will make up things and it will hallucinate. So you do have to read over it and kind of go back over it. But it's really useful for that. So I think it is, in general, AI is just really good at creating and generating ideas.
Do you ever see it making copywriting obsolete? If it can start to do the ideation, research, critical thinking.
I'd struggle to see how. I could see it making certain aspects of copywriting obsolete. So for example, I'd argue it's already making kind of basic content writing and blog writing somewhat obsolete, because it is very easy for someone who runs a website or a business to plug their stuff in and then just edit it themselves. And it's fine, because blog writing at the end of the day, it's not something that's designed to sell. No. It's not direct response. It's just very much kind of informative content, and it's great for that. And I think it is making aspects of that obsolete. But I think with regards to selling, I mean, I just don't understand how it could. And maybe I'm just ignorant or uninformed about it. But ultimately, AI as it is just taking a whole bunch of information and aggregating that to form whatever. And it's pattern recognition, right? That's how it formulates sentences. So it can't think of anything original. Because then if it makes copywriting obsolete, the point where it gets to that, I think we're all in a bit of trouble, because then that means it's understood human emotion,
Yeah, sure.
understood human behavior, which means we're all screwed, really. Right.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, that's a really interesting point, because I'm sort of at this inflection point where I'm like, okay, AI is very useful. We don't use it massively widely, but we use it quite a bit. AI is moving quick, right? And it's, you know, in terms of some of the progress on generating also even video content, I think it's moving very fast. And so I'm wondering, okay, in 5 years' time, or maybe 10 years, but probably closer to 5 years, I'm thinking maybe like most of what we do as an agency could be done by AI, but better, potentially.
Maybe.
Could we, you know, now we're doing all these content shoots with clinics, which is awesome. It's a ton of fun also. And you know, I guess one thing that you don't get with AI is you don't get the human connection like we're having here.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's our avatars talking here
Yeah.
people, right? But I don't know, could we do a clinic shoot and then the next clinic shoot is an AI shoot where we feed it the source content we've already shot and then we replicate it with AI? I don't know. I mean, is that the world we're moving to? So I'm often left wondering how broad it's going to be and yeah, short-term efficiency gains, but long-term, I don't know, basically. What are going to be the skill sets that survive?
Yeah. There's always two schools of thought with this, right? There's like the doomsday approach of like, we're all screwed. We're universal basic income, like we're all out of work, right? But then there's also the aspect which I kind of follow the other school of thought, which is more to do with that I think our roles will evolve. We don't know what it's going to evolve into. And similar with copywriting, right? Like, is it going to evolve into, if we're talking desirable skill sets, is it going to be more about someone who knows how to prompt engineer and do that kind of thing really well? You know, instead of having a copywriter who can write you 10 TikTok scripts, for instance.
Yeah.
They could write 100 and just really go hard at it. And I think that's kind of where we're heading into. But yeah, I mean, I share the same concerns as you to an extent. I think it's all uncertainty, isn't it? It's just like not knowing where things are going to end up. I mean, the moment it really starts understanding human elements and human psychology and that kind of thing, then we're getting to a really worrying phase, right? Like, I think we've got more to worry about than whether copywriting's gonna at that stage, right? I think that's that stage, right? We've got worry for our own livelihoods. And
no, fair enough. Well, on that note, no, honestly, look, I think it's been amazing having you. We've covered a lot of ground. I think there's some really useful nuggets in there. And again, I think this sort of juxtaposition between being a clinician and being a marketer and copywriter, I think it's an awesome niche. I think it's a great superpower. And I think a lot of people can benefit by following your content and working with you and following you on LinkedIn and your socials. So thank you so much for coming in. We have one final segment for you,
okay,
which isn't a scary surprise, don't worry, but we have a little bit of a segment we like to call the patient confessional.
Okay.
So this is the sort of the unfiltered, crazy stories. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Laurie, who's going to step into the confession booth and get those those juicy stories from you.
Okay, sweet.
Well, Sugz, welcome to the confessional. So this is the segment where we want to get your worst, funniest, craziest patient stories. We do ask you keep it anonymous because obviously we don't want to be sued.
Neither do I.
Exactly. But also you can obviously change names or pronouns, whatever you feel like doing, but just give us the juiciest stories that come to mind. And I feel like one of the things I've realised is that with dentistry, you probably have a lot of crazy stories that maybe you've not got to share yet. So that's why I thought, this would be fun. So, kicking it off, what's the most ridiculous thing a patient has ever said to you?
It's kind of said and done.
Please do. Yeah. I mean, expand. We love that.
So to paint the picture, 2 years out of dental school, I'm still quite green, and it's quite a heavily NHS-based practice. So with NHS, you have what's called fee paying and non-fee paying. Non-fee paying tend to be people who can't afford it, so they're called exempt patients. So anyway, this patient comes in, she had a car accident a few years ago. She doesn't pay for treatment, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I'll just make her a new denture, no problem, like it's whatever. And I made her a new denture, and most dentists can relate to this. If a patient picks up the mirror, like you give them a mirror, if they hold it within 6 inches of their face, red flag, like your heart sinks, because you know they are going to be picking apart everything, right? So when I gave her the mirror, she held it that close to her face, about 6 inches away. And she was like, no, it's not right. Like, this is digging in, and this is, the shape of this needs to be like this, and blah, 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 blah. Fine. Okay. Like, no problem. I was like, cool, we'll do it again. So it ended up being like 4 remakes. Okay. So then to put that into context, I'm happy being open with numbers in terms of how much and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. As a dentist at the time, probably getting paid about 120 quid for that denture.
Okay.
And it cost me about £360 in total, like, with all the remakes and everything. I didn't even own the clinic, so it's like I didn't even know what that cost.
Yeah.
The guy, the principal I used to work for. So anyway, we got to the 4th one, and she walks in, and she comes in with a napkin, and I'm like, okay, it's a bit weird. And she comes in with a napkin, and then again, it's wrong, obviously. And she shows me the napkin, and she's drawn diagrams of where things should go and like what color it should be, and she's like really done intense research. I'm talking like stuff that you'd only know if you went to dental school or did some sort of dental technical thing. So either she went to a dentist and got this, I highly doubt that, because I don't know any dentist that would write on a napkin, but either she did that or she did some intense Googling, and she like did all this stuff. She wrote out a whole list. So this was a big learning point for me, was I was kind of like, I can't do anything. Like there's nothing more I can do for you. And this is the first time I've ever had to say no to a patient. So I was just literally like, I can't do anything. I feel like I'm not skilled enough to meet your expectations. And I need to refer you on to hospital. And I just turned away. And I turned away and just started typing my notes. And those 5 seconds felt like an hour, because I could feel her like still staring at the back of my head. And I was just waiting for her to get up and go. And then, yeah, she got up. I never saw her again, but that was like the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I've never seen someone like so meticulously detailed writing out things like that. And
that's mad. Where do you draw the line? Like, have you now got better boundaries? Has that been a lesson for you? Like, would you have originally maybe turned away after number 2 and not number 4?
Yeah. I mean, I think looking back, I think now I'm more conscious of my skill set. I'm more conscious of what I can and can't do. And I think as an essence of humility, of knowing that there's better clinicians out there that can deliver the work to a better standard, and just being open and honest with the patient about that. And actually patients are more appreciative of that.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize. I always thought patients would lose confidence in me if I said, look, I'm not skilled enough to do this. But actually, vast majority of patients I say that to are like, I really respect your honesty, because you could have easily just taken my money, done the work, and done it to a standard that wasn't good enough. So yeah.
Yeah, I think people appreciate that. And yeah, it's something that you've got to kind of like be confident in your own skills to be able to do that as well, rather than just be, I'm going to get it right, I'm going to get it right, and cost obviously your principal a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so next question. What's the most awkward patient interaction? I feel like that's probably a really awkward one, but what was the most awkward patient interaction that you've had?
I would say a patient who they didn't mean to do this, and they don't know they're doing this, who kept sucking my fingers. And that was like, looking back, what it was is probably that they were trying to swallow and my fingers were in the way. That's how I explained it to myself anyway. And that was really awkward, because I can't exactly say stop sucking my fingers. Like they're gonna say they're not, or it's just really awkward.
Yeah.
I just kind of sucked it up and just got on with it. But yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, literally quite. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And now for the burning question that everyone wants to know: is the patient always right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Expand.
The patient is always right, because even when, as a clinician, you think they're not right, that's a failure on you to not have communicated with the patient in a way that you understood their concerns. And when I say a failure, I don't mean that like you're a bad clinician. I mean that in the sense of something went wrong there that led you to misunderstand the patient. And as a result, it's not that the patient was wrong, it's that you misunderstood them a lot of the time. And I think that's just also just the way I like to process things, because if I do think patients are wrong, then all of a sudden it's a blame game of like, oh, this patient was wrong. Like, it's nothing to do with me. I'm perfect. I'm like, I've done X amount of courses. I'm amazing. But more so, okay, well, what did I do wrong there? You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's very good interest. What's the word? I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean. Like when you're looking internally,
introspective,
introspective of you to like realize, okay, actually maybe it's something that I can do, not necessarily with your skill, but your communication. Or
it nearly always is. It nearly always is. And when we're talking about like litigation and things like that within dentistry, the highest litigated scenarios are to do with communication. You know, it's not to do with clinical mistakes, because patients, if they like you, will accept things that go wrong because they know that things can go wrong in a clinical setting. Healthcare isn't perfect. You're dealing with a human body. You know, biology reacts in its own way. But if you don't communicate with them in the correct way, that's when shit hits the fan. And that's even if you've done everything you're meant to do. Even sometimes then the patient can be upset with things, right? So
yeah, no, super interesting. Well, thank you very much for sharing those stories. I feel like you probably have more, and if we speak again, you'll probably have more.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we'll definitely have to get you back on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Love hearing the real stories behind the aesthetics, medical and dental industries? Make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Patient Is Always Right for exclusive content. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to watch the full episodes on YouTube. Hit follow, subscribe, and stay tuned.